we can't fix everything, but we can all find one thing. Whatever calls to you. Do one thing. Do one thing.
Welcome to the Our Hen House interview. This is Jasmine Singer.
This is Marianne Sullivan.
And we're so happy to welcome to the show today Carol Mithers, author of Rethinking Rescue, Dog Lady, and the Story of America's Forgotten People and Pets. Carol, did I say your last name right?
You did.
Oh, good.
Amazingly, because many people don't. So good for
Really?
you.
Because I
Yes.
was like, what would the options be?
Mithers?
Mithers?
Mithers, Smithers, Mothers, you name it.
Right,
Oh, dear.
Mothers. Well,
Right.
we're so happy that you're here. Just for our audience, Carol is a journalist who has written about Los Angeles and extraordinary women, which is two of my favorite topics, for over 30 years. And her work has appeared in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, LA Weekly, and many other places as well. So just another little reminder for our viewers and our listeners, please don't forget to subscribe and hit like wherever you listen or watch. Now, Carol, officially welcome to our hen house. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
And congrats on the book. It's such an accomplishment. And we're just so happy that Rethinking Rescue is out there now, and very excited and eager to pick your brain. It tells a lot of stories, but fundamentally it explores how human poverty and income inequality affect the fate of animals, and how you can't solve these problems without considering both. And now clearly poverty makes everything so much harder, but could you start by elaborating on this particular connection and some of the specific ways in which poverty impacts animal welfare?
Sure. I think ever since the movement to try to protect domestic animals from euthanasia in the nation's shelter started, the movement has been very focused on getting those animals out of the shelter and finding them homes. Rightly so, because for years and years there was a common practice of simply bringing animals in and killing them because it was assumed that nobody wanted them. But we didn't look so much at how those animals got there in the first place, except to think about their owners, their previous people, as careless or wanting to dump them or getting rid of them the second they became a little bit of trouble. But the truth is, and one of the things that's worth remembering in this discussion is that something like a third of dogs and cats that end up in shelters were let go by the homes that they once had. So what happened that those people let those animals go? Was it that they didn't love them? Was it that they were trouble? Was it that they didn't care? And often the answer is not that. It has to do with money and class and their place in the world. What would cause someone without money to lose a pet? Well, one is that a lot of shelters charge reclamation fees if an animal escapes the yard or gets lost and is picked up. Maybe that doesn't seem like much, but if you are operating on a very strict budget and really don't have extra money, and you get to the shelter and they want $50 or $100 before releasing that pet back to you, that might be the reason you say no. Another problem is that veterinary care is expensive and is constantly getting more expensive. The price of veterinary care has risen even faster than human health care over the last decade, in part because there's been a huge corporate and venture capital takeover of veterinary practices, and that ends up not only raising prices, but putting pressure on vets who are already under tremendous pressure to upsell services. You read the statistics on how many Americans live paycheck to paycheck or don't have a couple of $100 in the bank to deal with an emergency. And you have an animal. What if your dog gets hit by a car? what if your animal suffers an ACL or CCL tear? These surgeries are tremendously expensive. And even going to the vet for something smaller, I can tell you, having had 3 rescue dogs myself, there's always blood work. There's you can't get out for less than $500, $400, and that's really asking a lot from people. How do you pay if you're on a limited budget? How do you pay if you're on work a minimal wage job? You have a couple of options. One is to surrender the animal. The other is to take on catastrophic debt. And that is why some of the animals that belong to people in poverty get surrendered. Humane euthanasia can also be very expensive. And so if you have a suffering pet, a dying pet, there are people who will surrender the animal to the shelter, knowing that a suffering animal will be put down, but they can't be with that animal. They can't hold it while it takes its last breath. And then a final one, and maybe I've forgotten some, but a big one is housing. It is very hard to find affordable housing in this country. It is twice as hard to find affordable housing that accepts a pet. Those that do sometimes charge pet rent, and that may be just enough to make an apartment or a house unaffordable. Some places charge pet deposits that may or may not be refundable. And people are in a very difficult position when they have animals. In some cases, a landlord might have been looking the other way, even when a lease says no animals, and then a new owner comes in and says everybody's got to get rid of their animals. And you're in the
No.
position of either staying housed with your family or surrendering the pet. And while a lot of people say, I'd rather sleep on the street before I give up my beloved dog or cat, I think that is easy-ish to say when you're not in that position, and not so easy when you really, really might end up sleeping on a sidewalk.
There's so much to unpack there. And, I really want to go into all of those issues. Before I ask you the next question, though, I just wanted to mention that New York City has this amazing law, which has been in place for years, like probably 40, 50 years, that says if you've been in your apartment for 3 months and held your animal without hiding the animal, you can't be evicted for a no pet clause. And every community should have that law, because you're exactly right. The reason that happens is usually has nothing to do with the animal. It has everything to do with they want the apartment back.
They want the apartment back, and in many cases, I mean, I wrote about pet rent for Dame magazine, and I looked at some of the statistics that Michelson found when they were writing about pet-friendly housing. They're big proponents of it, but they were looking at the damages that an animal typically caused in a rental unit, and it was tiny. And many people pay for it themselves because they feel bad that it happened. It's not. There's nothing usually that a good cat or a dog will do that will justify $50 a month.
Yeah,
Extra.
can all be fixed. Like whatever it is can be fixed, even if they
And
shoot the wall, which they do occasionally. It's not that big a deal.
No.
Anyway, I like I said, I want to get into some of those issues, but before I do that, I just want to make clear to people that this book. I mean, so far we've been talking about very policy things, but it's almost a biography, and focusing on this woman, Lori Weiss, and her work is just really a centerpiece of the book, and it's kind of built around it, though it also delves into other issues. Can you just tell us a bit about her? She sounds like an amazing human being, and her work in Los Angeles, and how it so intensely reveals this connection between animal and human suffering at the hands of poverty.
She is an amazing person. And what I found most interesting about her was that we all talk about this now, about the connection between poverty and pet suffering, but we were not talking about it when she began, when she first figured this out. I can't say she's the first person in the United States, but she was certainly one of the first. So she began working at a furniture factory in downtown Los Angeles in the mid 1990s. And she was an animal lover, and downtown, that section of downtown was and remains pretty gritty. And she saw a tremendous number of strays on the street, and it broke her heart. And she wanted to help them. And so she and a coworker started doing a couple of things just ad hoc. Nobody was paying them. They were dipping into their own pockets. They were feeding some of the animals. They were plucking the ones that they thought were strays and taking them to vets and having them sterilized because they were seeing puppies being born and kittens being born, in alleys with nobody watching out for them. And gradually she came to realize that some of the animals she thought were strays were not strays. They belonged to unhoused people. And she began helping those people, understanding that some of them were not nice people, but some of them were. And some of them did not take what we would call proper care of their pets, not because they were trying to be evil, but because they didn't have the understanding or resources to do so. And so she started helping out. She registered something like 300 dogs to herself because she was told by the local shelter that people without fixed addresses couldn't take out animal licenses. And animal licenses are important for many reasons, but partly because if an animal gets away from you and is taken into the shelter, a license enables that shelter to call you up and say, we have your dog, and to help it get back home. But they wouldn't do that if a person was unhoused. So she registered all those animals to herself. So if one of them was picked up, she could get it back to its person. She also organized spay-neuter clinics that would come downtown, and that grew into a rescue called Downtown Dog Rescue, in which she would help people on the street. She would also take in animals that would be homeless after their people got into rehab, went to jail, moved away, and she found those dogs new homes. It was a very rudimentary effort. She and her coworker Richard Tuttlemondo built a kennel in the back of the furniture factory out of scrap wood and scrap fencing. And their boss, for some miraculous reason, just like, I don't see that. I don't see what's happening.
Right. He was a bit of an unsung hero, wasn't he?
Yes. And, Lori told me that he read the book recently and said, wait, you were doing all that? How did I not know? So Downtown Dog Rescue grew that way. And then at a certain point, she decided that she could turn her efforts to South Los Angeles, which was a much larger and more complex part of town. And she took on helping that community, in which that area has one of the busiest public shelters in the city. It is historically underserved and filled with poverty and all of its many burdens. She started running community clinics there where people could come on a weekend, and she got a bunch of veterinarians to volunteer. They would do microchipping, flea treatments, vaccinations, and if you wanted to continue getting help from her, you had to agree to get your animal sterilized. And she would help people make appointments and get them subsidized spay and neuter. And I should say that effort is still ongoing. I was just volunteering at one of her clinics maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. 300 dogs and cats were seen. Some of the same veterinarians. This is now, I don't know, what are we talking, 20 years? It's like become a community event.
Wow.
And she's changed over the years. I think she's spending more attention now on affordable vet care because she sees that as really an important linchpin to addressing this problem. And about a year ago, she actually rented a space in Southeast Los Angeles and has her own veterinary clinic with a mobile van parked in back. And she has a vet who's on her payroll who does spay and neuter at very low prices or no prices, and it's working with people who are not only in poverty, but some people who are really, really on the edge of our society and whose animals have a disproportionate effect on the number of unwanted animals being born, because there are people whose whole communities, whole blocks where animals are roving and getting sick and getting each other pregnant and giving birth to the kind of animals that will then end up in the shelter, and that frankly very few people right now want to adopt.
I just want to give a little shout out to an episode that we did not that long ago where we interviewed Christine Kim, who is the founder of My Dog Is My Home. And they talk so much about housing justice and animal companionship. So I think I pulled it up. That's episode 792. But I love to hear that there's a movement toward, these issues being discussed. And yeah.
Yeah, she's an important figure too. Yes. Yeah.
Another thing that I just really wanted to unpack it a little more, because I noticed in reading the book and following Lori's trajectory, it focused on two, they're really pretty different populations, which you kind of alluded to. Some of them are in truly desperate need. These are people who are outside the mainstream of society. Long-term unhoused people, addiction, lots of mental illness, really people on the edge. It's really hard to imagine how they even survive. And there are also stories of these pretty successful programs helping people who are struggling, but I guess what used to be called the deserving poor, like people who have jobs. In fact, they have 3 of them sometimes, and they haven't fallen out of the mainstream of society, but they need help because they can't afford their apartment or they're getting evicted or whatever. So do you see the needs of these populations of their animals is they seem very different to me, that this is almost 2 big, enormous projects.
Well, they're different and not different. And the ways in which they're not different is that I think it all comes down for vet care. Maybe there's more similarity because they all need access to affordable vet care. And in some cases, free vet care, because there's no such thing as affordable. When it comes down to pet-friendly housing, yes, that would be different. If you're living in a trailer on the street, there's nobody gonna kick you out for having a dog or cat. And mental illness, somewhat different too. I mean, one of the things that I think is actually really remarkable about Lori is her ability to interact with communities and people that are seriously on the edge. I mean, people who are out there, and I've gone out with her a couple of times. Some of the scenes that she deals with are actually, they're shocking, and she has a way of talking to people and being quietly firm, but entering that reality in a way that does not reflect judgment, and enables those people to really trust her and deal with her. And I think that's an incredible skill. And I think it's partly because she doesn't feel that judgment. There are people she sees as bad pet owners or pet people. And she will, somebody is hitting an animal or starving an animal or doing egregiously bad behavior, she will in fact say, no, I'm not helping you. In fact, when she was working downtown, she would say, like, you do that animal is mine. You're going to come home to your tent and the dog is gone, because no, unacceptable. But when people are merely, I don't know, just out there, and she can talk, and she can talk in a sympathetic way and get people to trust her enough to accept the help. And the help oftentimes helps the animal, but sometimes it can also help the person.
Yeah, well, one thing that I think kind of changed me was an interview we were giving recently to Sherry Franklin at
Mhm.
Muttville in San Francisco. And, I have always had a stick up my ass about people surrendering their animals. I've always just been the one that's like super judgy and like in like one sentence, Sherry sort of changed my perspective on that. Just like, you know, that's that's just not always the case. That like most of the time they really want to keep their animal, and like I just like that realized what a jerk I've been.
I mean, I have no trouble with you being harsh with yourself, Jasmine, but you said long before that interview about your Chihuahua George, who you adopted from some
Downey in
really,
LA.
yeah,
It's a harsh shelter. Yeah.
yeah, tough
Yeah.
Yeah.
shelter, and he was the most elegant little gentleman,
Oh my
and
God. Just like he sat like this
but
all the time.
he was incontinent, and you like learned about pee pads, and
Well,
he lived for many
male
more years,
wraps. No,
but you
male
always,
wraps.
well, whatever they're
The
called,
diapers. It's an important distinction because people know about pee pads, but not about the male wraps, and that's my next
okay. But
phase of
you always
life is
said
to
before you
educate.
spoke to her that whoever he belonged to obviously loved him because he was very confident, and
Yeah.
he wasn't scared of the world at all. And if they'd known that, they probably would have kept him. Like,
They might have. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I bet a
No,
lot of people would. I mean, an incontinent dog is a hard thing to handle if you live in an apartment. Like, it's just a hard thing to handle, and you don't know there's a way to handle it. And then there's this very easy way to handle it. Anyway, I'm digressing.
I know, but yeah, I
You
appreciate it.
digressed first.
I digress, then you digress. This is what we do. But okay, so like bringing it back together here, of course it has been obvious in the humane movement that we can't adopt our way out of this, and yet, I mean, gosh, that one day that I got George at Downey, like that was really hard. I cried a lot that day because we
I
went to a
bet.
lot of shelters, and
I bet.
um but you seem to believe that this is too often the approach taken by too many to adopt our way out of it. So can you just speak on that? Explain why keeping animals in homes, even homes that are struggling and have made some mistakes, is generally the best way forward, unless I'm misunderstanding.
No, I think both of those things are true. And I think the problem, there are a couple of things. One is that the people who have been the most active in the humane movement are people who have resources. And that is completely understandable because if you are working 3 jobs, you're not going to have time to be a volunteer at the shelter or run a rescue. Fine. But I think that sometimes can blind us to what reality is for people who are struggling. And that is where some of the judginess comes from, is that when we're not in that position, we just don't get it. Maybe we don't have friends, we don't see it. And so the idea of a surrender becomes really a terrible thing because we don't understand. But there's also the move to adopt is really appealing, or the emphasis on adoption is appealing because the animals are really cute, and it's a really nice way to publicize and popularize the idea of helping dogs and cats with pictures of sad-eyed animals in shelters, because all of us love them and want to help them, and we want them to have happy lives. And to some extent, the drive to keep animals in the homes they have is less sexy. That's not a great word, but it's like you're stopping something bad from happening, and that doesn't show in the same way
Yeah.
as rescuing. It's like giving a dog a vaccination is less sexy than saving a sick dog,
Yeah.
because you can't prove the negative. But I keep one of the things that I say is that if you're talking about why keeping animals in their homes, and again, not abusive homes, not a neglectful homes, but homes that need some help, it's both moral and practical. And moral because people deserve the love of animals, and people love their animals, and the animals love them. And why would we break that bond if there's a way to not break it? Practically, the shelters are still full. Are we going to impose financial categories
Yeah.
on who gets to? And we're never going to get all those animals home, and we're not going to empty those shelters as long as there's another flood of dogs and cats coming in. You need
This
to
reminds
you,
me of you know, kids in foster systems and how
yes, yes,
there's such a
yes.
strong push to like get them back to the parent no matter what. I mean, I'm speaking completely out of turn here because I
No,
don't
but
actually
you're
know that much about that industry,
but
but yeah.
but that is true, and it's it's dicey because there's going to be a certain amount of disagreement over what constitutes a home that's good enough. If if you find an animal that has mange, and the mange has been allowed to get to where the animal's really suffering, does that mean the people involved were really neglectful, and they saw an animal that was obviously suffering and didn't deal with it?
Right.
Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe
But
they didn't
like
know what
any
to do.
any policy issue, drawing bright lines, it is so much easier and simpler than having to look at the facts of individual cases and talk to individual people and decide who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth.
Yeah.
So it, like everything else that government should be doing, it's hard and it's complicated and people want it to be simple. But another issue I think that you alluded to is like like I mean, I do think, as you said in the beginning, that there have been shifts in this direction of trying to keep animals in homes.
Hmm.
But even if all you care about, even if you think that nobody deserves these animals, and I would say I'm one of those people who thinks that probably nobody on the planet deserves a dog. Um, they're way too good for us. Um, but even if you believe, and you don't care about people at all, if you take their animal away, they're just going to get another animal. I mean, they're not going to like, if people want a dog, they want a dog, and
Right,
it's
right.
not that hard to get them. And people will breed their dogs, and they like it just incentivizes that. So it's just it just seems so obvious that the best thing to do is to keep them in homes, but so difficult to make those decisions about which homes are okay and which aren't.
It is difficult, and the other thing is that I can only speak about Los Angeles, but I don't think we're that different, which is that government services like animal services are just perennially underfunded. So the notion that they are going to take it on themselves to decide who gets a home, what to do, it's just not going to happen. And if dogs and cats are taken away from people, they're going to be put into a shelter, and many of them will be older. Maybe they'll be big, maybe they'll be bullies. Is the reality that somebody else is going to appear to take them and give them the life they deserve? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Ugh, this is complicated. It's funny because Marianne and I focus like 99% on farmed animal issues because
Mhm.
the solution is so simple to me. But when
That
you're
is an
getting into
easier
these,
one.
right, in a way it is, isn't it? Ironically. But one of the things that really struck us when we were reading your book is that like when the programs were set up for people who are struggling and working, albeit on a shoestring, they ended up being able to help people with so much more than their issues with their animals. And it's like it's almost as if animals are the entry point for finding ways
Yes,
to help
yes.
people survive and even thrive. Talk about that a bit. Is that right?
Well, yes, and look, for a time, Lori had a partnership with a legal clinic where people were coming in with landlord issues, but then there usually ended up being other things, immigration issues, domestic violence issues, as the lawyer I talked to said, nobody likes lawyers. And if it hadn't been for me being, this woman was sitting at the shelter, if it hadn't been for the animal and that being the entry point, they never would have talked to me. Lori now also has a social worker who is working with her. And so she can talk to people about other issues and deal with mental health issues. So it's a really nice way of getting, if someone is willing to talk to you about their dog or cat, then other things open up. During the time that Lori was, her coworker Amanda was sitting at the South LA shelter, she got people who were they just needed to talk. While I was there one time with her, this man came in and he just wanted to sit there. He was lonely. And so it's a way of bringing together a community. Just like I'm sure you all know that when you are out at a park with a dog, you make friends with people. It's like anybody that you meet who wants to pet your dog and tell you how cute it is. It's like they're an instant friend and you have an instant bond.
Yeah, that's back
Yeah,
in the day when I didn't have when I had animals who would go to dog parks. Now, of course, I've somehow wound up with like 5 dogs who are like, there's a dynamic, we'll just say. But Marianne, go ahead.
they're all very sweet.
I had one of those too. Yes, I know. Yeah.
They're darlings.
Stay
We love
back,
them.
stay back. Dog's not friendly.
I mean,
yeah.
I really do think that's really such a big point. I mean, and this is just something, I'm going to try to put this together because this is just something that I've really been thinking about a lot. But the fact that caring about people's animals is a way to address, these really big social issues. I think that animals play a more important part in our lives than we realize. And I'm connecting this to this. This has just kept occurring to me as I was reading the book. We recently interviewed Will Potter about his book, Little Red Barns. It just recently come out. And he argues kind of more or less, I hope I'm not mischaracterizing him, that fascism always depends on this myth of a return to an idyllic or glorious past that actually never existed. Make America great again, that sort of thing. And I just feel like companion animal policy work is rooted also in this myth that every dog and cat belongs in a nuclear family living in a suburban home, that's the right life. Yeah. Going back to my childhood, that was my childhood. And it's never been the case. Loads of animals were being killed in shelters then and always, and it's still not the case.
Millions back. Worse.
Yeah, they weren't even trying to adopt them.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just invisible. It's always easy to think something doesn't happen when an effort is made to make it completely invisible. But I don't exactly know where I'm going with this. But do you have the sense that some kind of myth pervades animal rescue work about how animals should live and gets in the way of real progress in the real world and helping both? I think the rubber really hits the road on this when we're talking about those populations that really are very compromised. And we look at them and we think, well, they shouldn't be allowed to have animals.
Well, yes, to some extent. But I look back on my childhood. We had a dog and we were terrible pet owners. We knew nothing. It was an educated white-collar family in the suburbs with a yard. The dog lived in the yard. She never came into the house. We fed her whatever was on sale, and we never trained her. We never walked her. And I feel tremendous guilt about that, honestly.
We all feel guilt about our first dog.
And yet
they have to teach us everything about dogs.
If you see some people who are unhoused are actually wonderful pet owners. I mean, I used to take my dog to a local park, and there was a guy there who was in his 70s, and I'm not sure what his mental challenges were. He smoked a lot of weed, and he lived in his van with his German Shepherd. And he was a vegetarian, and he bought steaks for his dog and cooked them out on the grill outside. And he walked her multiple times a day. She was the nicest, best trained dog. He was a wonderful animal owner. I think we can't know how people are with their animals until we look at it. I think there are a lot of dogs and cats that live in big, lush suburban homes and are by themselves for 15 hours a day because nobody's there with them. Are those dogs living better lives than a dog that's going out collecting cans on a street with an unhoused person? I don't know.
Mhm. So another thing that is, Marianne and I think about a lot is that like there are very few issues that kind of run the gamut of the political spectrum. And obviously, we're in an unbelievably divided moment in this country, to say
Yeah,
the least.
just
But
yeah.
are we divided about the role of dogs and cats? I mean, are there different stories that red and blue tell about the proper role of these animals in our lives?
I think there are differences and similarities, and I think some of the differences may have to do with the okayness of breeding and buying purebred animals. Um,
Mhm.
though I think that politically, I'm not sure. I think there are
Yeah.
probably liberals who also believe
Yeah,
in
I agree.
buying
It
purebred.
doesn't split very evenly.
No, do that. My local park is in a liberal neighborhood, and it's filled with doodles. um, but some differences. I think that there are people who still like to see dogs as working animals who
Mhm.
live outside. Um, no, I think it's more probably the breed the breeding is okay and buying is okay versus the other side.
Well, I,
Mhm.
I
Um,
wish I wish all the Democrats didn't think agreed with that because I agree there's a little bit of a difference there, but to be honest, I think it's one of the few issues where there are that really sharp dividing lines. Unfortunately,
no,
everybody falls on the wrong side of most of the issues, in my opinion. There's me and everybody else.
That's true. Yeah.
I do have a question I want to ask because I think it's really interesting that this is your first book focused on non-human animals. You've had other very successful books, but it's not like you're an animal writer. This isn't like
nope,
your beat.
nope, nope. It's
And
not.
you deal. I mean, you sat down and decided to write this book, and it's a subject that people usually do not want to look closely at. It's too painful. Almost everybody loves dogs. So for you, what were some of the most challenging, but also some of the rewarding aspects of going deep into this issue?
The challenging, I think, was the intractability of the problem, which remains painful because I think there was part of me that felt like Lori was this person who had come up with a solution. I fell into the book because I met her and because I found her work so interesting. And yet, as I pursued it, it became a lot more complicated than I had originally thought. I thought I was going to write a book about a really cool person who was saving dogs downtown. And then, duh, that wasn't, it was much more complicated than
Yeah,
that. And
yeah.
and yet now, so I've been following her and have written a bunch of tangential stories because I was in that world. And now it's like 12 years later. And the people I know who are in rescue are saying that they don't know what to do. They can't get anybody to adopt their animals. The shelters are full again. Euthanasia's up again. And nothing has changed. And
Mm.
so that is immensely difficult to understand. And what is to be done? Nobody seems to know. We're talking about, yeah, you got to adopt, you got to help, but there seems, and partly I think because rescue and shelter systems are so split regionally and locally, and there is no global organization or governmental structure that is overseeing things. So now you have different cities and different places, and they have somewhat different problems. What works in LA might not work in Houston, might not work in some tiny town in Tennessee, because it's different. And I find it very discouraging that the same things seem to be happening over and over
Yeah.
again, which you could say that about America too.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, and I lived, Marianne and I lived in New York City for a very, very long time. Then I moved to LA and now I live in Rochester. And you know, Marianne was especially very involved in the companion animal world, in the shelter world in New York City. And yeah,
Mhm.
you have such different like scenarios. It's like it's apples and oranges. You cannot compare it. And from where I stand, from my somewhat ignorant perspective here, it seems like New York City has had great strides. It, you know, at least in the 20 years that I lived there, it seems like it had some really great strides in terms of um, kind of popularizing adoption. And
Mhm.
there was some really great marketing and like just like the shelters worked together and it was partly just not replicable because it's New York City. It's like its own universe. I
Well, but
digress.
I think that spirit at least did move into a lot of the movement, the companion animal movement. And then COVID really, like COVID came and it kind of took care of everything. I mean, they all got adopted. They thought it was all fixed, but as you point out, like that was a
That
false
was
narrative.
false. It
And
was
as
false.
I don't think it's what happened in New York City was really sui generis. I think that there was a lot of progress. I mean, and you point that out in the end of the book that there was a lot of progress, but what's the situation now is not so good.
No, and I mean the progress. If you look at how many animals were being put down in the 70s, it's like night and day. So that is a huge effect. Although honestly, it seemed to me that a lot of that progress was not as much about people adopting animals as the adoption of widespread spay and neuter. It just wasn't
Right.
a
Yeah,
thing
no, it was
until
not a
then. So,
single issue project. Yeah.
but okay, so here's something that I don't understand. If we're wrestling now with puppies being born again because people couldn't get access to vet care during COVID, or why are we not pouring money and effort into getting hold of every person we can and urging them to sterilize their animals, especially if when we know that there may not be homes. You know, if you have a pit bull, you're not going to place 9 pit bull puppies. So I
Yeah.
think we could have more effect again on the front end rather than the back end. And there just doesn't seem to be I don't know, call it the will, but the excitement about doing that.
There,
Hmm.
you know, the approximately 100,000 years ago, Marianne and I were volunteering at a pit bull vaccination clinic in Oakland.
Mhm. Uh-huh.
And it was real. I mean, okay, it was the cutest day of my life, but it was also really heartbreaking, obviously. But while we were giving these vaccines, well, we weren't giving them, but we were presenting the people with like free spay and neuter coupons,
Mhm.
and like no one took them. I mean, there was just like a no, 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 like and it was like there was a strong cultural tie in the neighborhood we were in, I guess, to masculinity or
Right.
something. You know, I don't really know what my point is. I guess I'm just saying that like it feels really hard. It just feels like there's so many layers here that it's hard to know where you start.
It is hard, but I think the issue is that you just pick one layer and others will follow because you cannot wait to come up with the perfect all-purpose solution. I think
Right.
the issue of manhood and castration, if you will, is
Mhm.
probably not as extreme as it once was. And
Yeah.
people education and again when Lori was working in a community and getting to know people over time, it was then you could educate people on, health benefits of some of that surgery, or else, I will give you free dog food and I will help take care of your dog, but part of enrolling in my program is the
Mm.
dog has to be fixed. And you don't want to do it, cool, that's
Right.
fine, but I'm not going to help you anymore. So, okay, I want the services, so I'll do it.
And also, this was probably like 2009 or something. So maybe things have changed a little bit.
I
I
think they
mean,
have changed. I think people learn and maybe if they are not the ones that change, their children change because it's a different generation, or people who are immigrants from a culture where that was not particularly known or accepted, their children are growing up in a different atmosphere. And so, yeah, I think it has.
well,
But
speaking of
let me
immigrants,
just talk.
yeah,
Let
go
me
ahead.
just say a bit because I'm not involved at all in the companion animal world, and so I don't really know. But I feel like going to the younger generations, that they all want French bulldogs or something. Like
Oh
there just doesn't
God.
seem to be a real, like you were mentioning that, like like there was an excitement to it, like in the aughts, in the '90s and the aughts, there was an excitement to this is a passion project for so many people. And I just wonder whether that has diminished a little bit. There are criticisms. Katja Gunter, who we had on, was talking about this a bit about turning pit bulls into, kind of suburban love bugs.
Right.
Is that really what we want to do? But at the same time, there was a time when adopting an animal, pit bull or not, was like a point of pride. And I'm not sure it just seems like the fashionable puppy has become just as stylish as the adopted animal. And of course, as you said, adoption is not the only way out of this, but it's one of the ways.
Yeah, I don't know how you change the
I know.
fetishizing, the fetish. We saw it with Chihuahuas when Chihuahuas were like
Yeah.
a must-have, a
Yeah. And it's
must-have breed.
probably not French bulldogs anymore. I don't
I'm
I
a
don't even know
Chihuahua
what the dog of the
person.
day is.
But I do get the
Yeah.
very, very old senior ones. Just while you're sitting there talking about the puppies, I'm
Oh,
like, who wants a puppy when you could get like a 13-year-old Chihuahua who's just gonna like be the sweetest, most loving
yeah.
soulmate you've ever had? But I do have the Chihuahua disease. I just wanted to put that out
Well,
there.
it's not the choice. It's the fashion. It's the
Yeah,
fashionable animal. We
sure.
had Chihuahuas, we had Dalmatians after 101 Dalmatians.
Oh
We
God.
had Huskies after Game of
Mhm.
Thrones, and right now or recently the LA shelters absolutely filled with Huskies, which are hard dogs to have if
Yeah.
They're
you don't
very
have
hard
space,
dogs.
and they don't belong in Southern California because it's hot here. And so the French bulldogs are the latest. It's vanity, and they're bred to be unhealthy, and it's horrible all down the line. But
I
Yeah.
just, I mean, and I know that, and our listeners know that. I just wonder why, like, we have so much trouble considering that everybody loves dogs, or almost everybody. And we have so much trouble conveying these just facts, just basic facts about how bad breeding is, and how there are dogs who are homeless and they're just as great, if not better, than like like and the people, going back to the point you were making, that lots of people have dogs, and one of the things that we should contribute to is helping them keep those dogs in those homes because they make life better for everybody. Like all of these policies, uh, Carol, I know you can't fix all of this. I'm
I
just
think some of
conveying
it,
my frustration that
the
all these
people
policies seem so obvious.
people don't see, and I think people are. I mean, we feel a lot of this about politics right now, that people don't
Yeah.
see. And if you don't see a dog breeding operation, just like not seeing a cattle killing operation, it is easy to not think about it. Just like you don't see a sweatshop where your cheap overseas shirt was made. And so people, I think, in this country live in a lot of remove from unpleasant realities, and they don't want to be told about it. And even if you tell them, it's easy to somehow to not focus on it. I have my little Frenchie here, and until I go to the vet and discover that she needs thousands of dollars worth of surgery because she was bred to be crippled, then I just can ignore it.
Do you have a
Yeah,
chip on your shoulder? Like, are you like curmudgeonly like me and Marianne, or are you somehow a sunnier person?
Oh, it depends. I like to think I'm sunny. My family would probably disagree. Right now, the political situation makes
Yeah.
me very, very unhappy. Yeah.
Well, is there, by the way, just, I know we've kept you for a really long time, but what is the impact of the current out and out war on immigrants? Speaking of downtown LA
Well,
and everywhere.
Okay, let's bring it back to the animals, which is that Lori's thrift shop, which is down in the community of Southgate, heavily immigrant, heavily Latino, is not getting foot traffic because all of the stores on that street are not open on the weekends because people are afraid to come out. And this morning I was told on my local next door, which I read because I'm a glutton for punishment, but ICE was apparently down at the local grocery store loading up their trucks for the day. So it's not happening in my part of town right now for the most part, but if troops are sent back here, I don't know.
Yeah.
And there's no project to keep animals in people's homes if people are being evicted from their homes and sent somewhere to another country.
There's a certain percentage of the animals that are around now without homes because their people were deported. I don't think there's any figures on that, but it seems absolutely undeniable.
Okay, well, I think we have to close, but I brought it to a really bad place. Yeah, no. So I'm going to bring it back. Like, I brought it to a bad place. So like, what is something in this world that either you're excited about or gives you hope?
I think the fact that we're having this conversation, and that, as you said, these conversations are now common, is a wonderful thing, because we are starting to think about, I think it's a way of opening the humane movement in a way that brings in new people and makes it more human as well as humane, which is absolutely necessary to this struggle.
Can our listeners who are already, like involved with animal advocacy to a large degree, is there anything they can do to, keep this conversation going or like help out somehow?
I think look around their communities for efforts that are working with people and pets and people who may need help. And Lori said once people ask her about, how can I start something like this? It's overwhelming. I can't do it. It's just like, if you're at the vet and somebody's struggling, pay the bill, contribute to the bill, donate some food to a pet food bank, of which there are many in many cities. Go volunteer at a shelter, go look around for groups like hers that are helping people and pets, contribute to downtowndogrescue.org. Any of those things, write to assist efforts to open up affordable housing to being more pet friendly. Anything that calls to you. I think we can't fix everything, but we can all find one thing, whether it's the homeless person with an animal, whether it's housing, whether it's domestic violence victims who can't find safe refuge because they want to bring their animals. Whatever calls to you, do one thing.
And while you're doing it, get a copy of Rethinking Rescue. Carol, can you tell us about how people can find you online?
They can go to my website, carolmithers.com, but this book is available at Bookshop, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Powell's, wherever you get your books. It's out in paperback, it's on Kindle, and it's an audiobook as well. So whichever format is your thing.
And I just also want to remind our listeners and our viewers to leave a review, because even if you're not getting it on Amazon, I've said this before, but I don't get my things on Amazon, but I'll leave a review on Amazon because that's where people are buying things, and it really helps. It helps get get the word out there. It supports the author, but more importantly, for these purposes, it helps animals. So
Yeah.
take a
And
few minutes and do
Goodreads
that.
as well. Good there. You can leave a review
Yeah,
on Goodreads also.
I love that. Well, I thank you so much for all of the time and insight that you've shared with us today, and for all that you're doing to spread the word and to change the world for animals. We really appreciate you.
And I appreciate you too. And this was a really interesting conversation.
If you're
We
a
could go
flock
on for
member,
hours.
I know, that's why I'm like sitting on my hands. I'm trying really hard to not keep going. But if you are a flock member and you want more too, then make sure you tune into Carol's reading from Rethinking Rescue on Monday. You will get that in your email. And for everyone else, for everyone, subscribe to Our Hen House on your favorite podcatcher and or on YouTube. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much for joining us today on Our Hen House.